Welcome to Tech and Test, where we unravel the intricacies of technology, delve into the world of software engineering, and challenge the boundaries of software testing. Your host, Peter Johnson, will help you navigate the digital landscape, exploring the latest in tech, sharing insights into software development, and talking to the people that drive our digital world. Now, let's dive into today's episode.
And welcome to Tech and Test. This is the Tech and Test podcast. We're on episode 7. And with me in this fantastic surrounding, it's almost like we're in the studio actually, is Tony Godar. Tony, you're an engineering manager and you're sat in front of me.
Thanks for having me here.
No, thanks for coming on. Did you enjoy the espresso you had just before you came in this studio?
Yes, it hasn't kicked in yet, but give me about 5 minutes and I'll be bouncing around.
Brilliant. And just so the Tech and Test audience know who you are, who are you?
Who am I? So I'm originally from Canada.
Okay.
I've been in the UK for about 20 years. I've been around technology since I was very young.
Okay.
Started off as a developer for many years. I was at PlayStation making games in Japan, then came to UK and making SDKs, working on PlayStation, always the next console and so forth. A lot of fun there. Did a startup, and that's where I am here. So I've gone from essentially engineering to management.
Ah, brilliant. And so just to be honest with you right now,
yes,
I've always had an Xbox when I've been growing up. Right. I think it's only now I've got a PS5. So I've not.
Okay.
Just some context.
So a few years ago, I wouldn't have talked to you.
Okay.
But I'm actually very much, I'm an Xbox fan as well. When I left PlayStation, I did some Xbox development.
Oh, nice.
And I was very impressed with the whole development environment and their support system and the quality of their tools.
Cool.
It's good to step out and see what the competition does every once in a while.
Definitely. So I'm just thinking, so you were developing games, I imagine.
Yeah, more kind of initially games, and then I was working on video services on the PlayStation and the frameworks around it. So the original BBC iPlayer and terrestrial TV tuner on the PlayStation, and then all the streaming stuff kicked off. So I was involved with that.
I see.
And also before that, a lot on the disc media. So I was big into 3D.
Right.
On TVs. So you can really find the winner there. Then the PlayStation Portable came out, which had a really awesome, you could play videos on there. And then streaming media really took over the world.
I see. So what made you, is that the point you decided, I don't want to be part of this and I want to move into management? What made you transition from, was it a natural transition?
It was accidental. I think that's, for a lot of developers, it is accidental. And no one else wants to stop coding. And then at that point, so I think my first time leading a team, it was really, I came up with the project with a coworker and we really drove it. So I got a taste of management there. You learn by failure, which was great.
Right.
And then it kind of just snowballed from there. And then when I left Sony, I dabbled a lot on the coding and also management. Again, learning a lot through failure, learning a lot through success. And not intentionally, but I do enjoy management. I do enjoy getting involved, making decisions, and solving the difficult problems, but also in helping developers build their career, build their knowledge, and kind of guiding them.
I see. So what advice would you give to Tony starting now? So say you like someone who left college or university and you were looking to start as a developer, maybe, at the beginning of your career. What advice would you give to that person?
Well, really get your hands dirty and find something that you love. Really focus on something that really drives you to want to do it, not just during the day, but all night you're thinking about it, and on the side you're doing hackathons, then then it's natural. It's part of your day. It's part of your life, and then you can learn it inside out. And when you know something inside out, then you're valuable.
Yeah.
It's when you see someone that's kind of 9 to 5 and not really into it, they're just doing the bare minimum. And it doesn't last. And that person will probably end up changing careers down the line.
Right. Yes, I think what you're saying is follow your passion, right? Like
exactly. Yeah, it's interesting. So early on when I was at Sony, I met this old guy from Japan, one of the big executives. He came along and started meeting us, and he was all ranting about, it's all about passion. It's all about passion. That's just weird. And he was so obsessed with that. But now looking back, it kind of makes sense. I see where he's going.
So this old guy had wisdom.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's probably why they were sending him touring around the world. And yeah.
No, I think it makes sense. I think, when you start your career, you have one mindset of where you think it's going to go. And as you get more and more experience, you build up different, you work in different companies, different projects, potentially different domains, right? And
yeah.
Then your career and your perspective changes from when you first started.
Yeah, I really initially wasn't even thinking of going into the game industry. Mm-hmm. So I was doing database backend type stuff.
Okay.
And then an opportunity. So I was in Japan when PlayStation 2 was the iPhone type. It was the massive boom where everyone had to make a PS2 game because they were selling just boatloads.
Wow. Okay.
So I was at a company that had never made a PlayStation 2 game. We got a PlayStation 2 Linux retail unit and made a proof of concept, took it to Sony and got licensed and that sort of thing. It just kind of snowballs on what is exciting and what, I guess, what has potential and interest and so forth.
Yeah, so Tony, thanks for divulging your career. Appreciate it. As you know, the guy sat in front of you right now works in software testing. Some people call it QA. Some companies call it engineering productivity. It's testing, basically. It's software testing. What are your thoughts on testing?
It's important. So looking back, so when I first started, we were producing software for disk media.
Right.
The disk had to be perfect, the gold master. So it took a long time, and there is QA was very manual, obviously at that time, because back in the old days, and if there was any problems, it was pretty much a failure of the title.
Okay.
So you don't really have a second chance. So Sony would have massive groups in Japan, massive groups up in Liverpool, and just kind of bashing away. And we'd get bug reports back, fix them, bug reports back, fix them. But I really enjoyed working with those QA testers up, especially the guys up in Liverpool, because they really enjoyed finding the bugs. It was fun for them to break something. And that, I guess, enjoyment of finding a bug really works well. Since then, I keep on looking for testers that enjoy finding a bug and don't really rub it in your nose, but kind of, haha, I got you, in a good way. Since then, I guess next step was we'd have the disk and then the day one updates, which everyone loves, I'm sure. When you buy a game and then it downloads 30 gigs, I think they're taking advantage of that nowadays. But that just cut down the cycle, so you could release a lot quicker. And then now everything's downloadable. Everything's kind of, it just evolved a lot. What I've saw in the last place I worked, a startup, was my first experience working with an SDET.
Okay. And just to pause there, what is an SDET?
In my mind, a developer.
Okay. So an SDET, just in case you haven't heard, is a software development engineering test. So I think it was in the early 2000s that Microsoft came out with the SDET term. And since then, it sort of, exploded around the whole tech industry. So I think Amazon, Apple, all the other companies started to use that term. But interestingly, in 2014, Microsoft deprecated the term. So they kind of made it redundant, and it's a bunch of layoffs. And I think it was at the time when Microsoft acquired Nokia, and there was massive amounts of layoffs and a lot of SDETs went. But anyway, so when was the first time?
On that high note.
when was the first time you worked with an SDET, and what were your experiences with working with an SDET?
So I've worked with people that have had the role of SDET, but they just didn't call themselves SDETs.
Right.
It was just when in that case, it was that person was the hero of the team. Everyone loved them in that they were doing all this automation, all this help that fixed everything and made our lives a lot easier. And then when I wanted to find a similar sort of skill set, I stumbled upon these SDETs and then hiring them and integrating them in the team and working day to day with them in the stand-ups, planning and so forth. That's why I'm a big fan of that whole a developer that knows a hell of a lot about testing and makes the developer's life a lot easier and reduces risk.
It's interesting you say that, because there's companies who hire SDETs and there's companies who don't hire SDETs.
Yeah.
So, for example, Google have removed the software engineering and test role. And it used to be called SETI, or it used to be called software engineering test, then it became SETI, then it got removed.
And they're known for quality, aren't they?
But I think the reason companies have removed this, and I done a talk last week, well, actually, no, this week, on the SDET role and how it's evolving, or whether it's evolving, and that's another talk. Someone can watch that on YouTube. But essentially, if you have a test automation project or a tool you're building, isn't that a software engineering project that needs a software engineer?
Well, this goes back to my initial point of passion. So if you have a software developer that's passionate about algorithms, that's passionate about optimization, they're not going to be passionate about the tool that makes everyone's life easier. They're not going to be passionate about the continuous integration and the continuous deployment.
Yeah, I see.
But when you find the SDET that's really passionate about those aspects, that's where the real win is.
I see. Yeah, so it's really a case of where you're interested in, what type. It's almost like, you have a front-end software engineer who likes doing, I don't know, React, Angular, all of the UI stuff, right?
Yep.
They're really passionate about making the UI look really sexy and all of that. But they may not be so interested in making database optimizations in the back end.
Yeah, exactly.
So I guess it's a similar thing with the SDET role. It's like we all have some level of coding knowledge, right? We know what quicksort algorithm is, or merge sort, right? And or binary tree and all of that stuff. But we're maybe more passionate about getting Jenkins working in parallel with different jobs and making that scale, right? I think there are different levels of expertise or interests.
I think moving forward, everyone will be called software developers for some, and then you kind of specialize where you are best, which isn't a bad thing.
No.
But the bad thing is when they stop hiring people that are interested in that, and it gets lost. And then you have a bunch of developers that want to move fast, break things, and leaving things broken. Yeah. Then after it annoys the customers, then they'll just abandon your product. And that's kind of the risk. And that's what these big companies that have abandoned testing, abandoned SDETs, are starting to see a little bit.
Definitely. Yeah, I think there's been for example, I don't want to call out any company, but like Meta, for example, was very much known for not having SDETs, and is interesting where, maybe they're changing their mind on that with...
I struggle when I interview Meta people, because when I ask them about how do you test things, they say, we don't believe in testing.
Yeah.
And maybe you can do that with certain products, but it doesn't scale outside of Meta, I don't think.
Yeah. I mean, if you've got hardware, physical products, right? Whether it's a phone or a watch, smartwatch, right? All of these kind of devices, they become a lot more difficult when you've got firmware involved and you need to test with firmware and you've got that interconnectivity. And it's very different from testing a social media platform, right? Which you could, if you've broken something, you could just push a change really quickly, right? Welcome back, Tony. So, we were talking as we just walked back into would you call this a studio, this room? I don't know. What would you call this?
This is an audio studio.
It looks like a studio. It sounds like a studio. Maybe it is a studio.
It must be a studio.
So, I hope you've enjoyed your drink because on the way to the fridge, you were just talking about virtual reality.
Yes.
Right, VR. And you mentioned testing VR.
Yeah. So I got involved very early with virtual reality. So initially it was a spin-off of 3D TVs. So the whole 3D world. I did a proof of concept headset.
Right.
Where it was essentially showing two videos, left and right eye. And then there were some parallel projects going on in Sony, and that turned into a VR headset. And then with that VR knowledge, I ended up going to a VR startup that was doing VR music, live streaming of VR concerts.
Oh, wow.
This was pre-Oculus Go.
Right.
So we were in the lineup for one of the first apps on Oculus Go. It was a challenge to test. It was definitely a challenge to test. So because we're streaming live,
right?
We're streaming essentially 4K quality video from the venue to the user, and we were also trying to get our company up and running. So we had to demo it. So I guess there were some challenges demoing that high of a bit rate. So even if it wasn't live, getting that to stream well was a big challenge. So, like for example, we had to do a demo to Facebook executives to show it off, and it was really stuttery and horrible. So, kind of getting the video content at the time cached and hot enough, we literally sent people all around Facebook's office, trying to reverse engineer which network ingest it was coming from, and we actually sent people with VR headsets into cafes with fast internet, warming up the cache and testing it out. And one interesting thing was, so we had a big demo. It was running really well, and we had one tester. She was in a cafe right next to the office, and verifying that it worked from there.
Right.
And then the demo went really well, but we forgot to tell her to stop testing. So she's in this cafe with a big, beefy desktop replacement laptop and a big VR headset, and she was watching these VR concerts over and over again and giving us these test reports. And a week later, she asked us, do I have to keep on testing? She's been going in every day to do that.
Oh, wow. That's, I've used a VR headset to play a few games. And
yes.
After a while, you need to take that off. Depending on what game you play, right? It can be a bit overwhelming sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
Especially like driving. It can be so realistic that you get the impression that, oh my gosh, needs to stop. So I can't imagine doing that for a long time. Right. You'll need to take some regular breaks.
Yeah. And early days with VR, it was hit and miss. It wasn't a good experience. Bad frame rate and bad UX design, where people didn't really know what worked and what didn't work, and the hardware was lacking. But nowadays with Apple and their latest VR, well, they call AR headset, it's evolving really fast. Too bad they were so late.
Yeah. Well, I guess better late to the party than never, right?
Yeah, but if they could have gotten there a little bit earlier, it could have really continued the momentum well.
So do you think that momentum has sort of slowly died outside? Like, obviously Meta is still quite big into it, but do you think it's slowly dying, that trend?
Well, it has to go that way. There's the peak, then it's now mainstreamish. If it wasn't for Apple jumping on board right now, I think VR would be completely dead.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's actually been a big improvement in interest. We're seeing a lot more of the everyone that was big into VR and stuck into it is actually in a good position now by focusing on the Apple ecosystem. But it was a shame to see that Oculus didn't really catch on. So in the early days, it was so when the Oculus Quest was first coming out and John Carmack was CTO, it was quite exciting. Like even as one of the first early developers, we'd get emails at the end of the week randomly from John Carmack directly with tips on how to improve the quality of our rendering and suggestions on a lot of things. And we were making VR cameras, and he was giving us suggestions on how to do it and telling us we shouldn't do it. It was quite amazing to work with kind of one of your heroes.
Wow.
That's where it's when you're early on, I guess, an early adopter of technology, and there at the beginning, you can really deal directly with those people that invented it.
Sure, yeah. I guess when everyone else joins the party, that's when all the heroes have left, right?
Yeah, but I should have known because he left. So he left Meta/Oculus and went and focused on machine learning and AI quite early before the whole boom. So
you should have followed him.
Yeah. So, but he's been quite silent. So I wonder. So maybe the whole next big thing will be something that he's been working on behind the scenes, and that'll be take over what OpenAI has been doing.
And, what are your thoughts with AI potentially taking over people's, say you got your average software engineer that's developing code. Do you see we're going to be in a world where a lot of our code will be written by these AI agents? Or do you think there's always going to be human involved in the loop of writing that code?
It's just going to increase productivity. I guess there's two extremities. One, it'll increase the code quality, which it is doing. And the other extremity is it'll replace code generation. It'll look at the user interaction and make changes automatically. But at the end of the day, we're always going to need developers. We're always going to need. It's going to evolve. We'll be doing different languages. We'll be doing different parts of it. I see it really overall as a positive thing, but I don't see it replacing developers.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think there's a lot of media outlets that tend to put this sort of fear mongering out there to say like AI will replace developers, and there's actually some startups in the US that are looking to build those sort of startups, which your AI, your coworker is an AI system. Right.
A lot of it's clickbait. So you should name this podcast episode of AI will replace developers and testers.
This is another question, right? If we're getting so much code that's auto-generated by these agents, right? You said it improved quality. But actually, with more code that's going to be generated, do we need more testing?
It depends where you are. So if you're somewhere that doesn't believe in testing, then they're going to be working on machine or AI testing replacements or code quality replacements. But and I guess if it's mission critical, your missiles and your banks and so forth, there'll be a slow adopter. But I see like the game industry will be heavily influenced and it'll adopt it, and they are adopting it. There's so much repetitive development in game development. There's so much repetitive development in art and sound design that it'll just speed up game teams so that instead of it taking 5 years to make a game, maybe they can do it in 2 or 3 years. And other apps are smaller scale, and it won't be as big of an impact, but definitely it will impact it. But users are noticing when things are made by AI.
Yeah.
If I see AI generated art, it's kind of nowadays. It's like,
it's not cool as it used to be, right?
And when I see an email that's generated by AI, I can tell, and I think it's got to go far beyond that in quality.
Yeah, I think a lot of AI generated content can be noticed. Like, the only thing that's difficult to determine is if someone has started with AI generation, like creating some content, then modified it. You know, there's certain words that come out of ChatGPT that you can see in an email if it's come from AI, probably.
Oh yeah, I definitely feel that. So when I've asked ChatGPT to reword things, it's really obvious. So that's why I go to Claude. Claude is much better at realistic language. So I mentioned earlier, I've listened to all your podcasts. They've been great, some great guests, but I don't think your listeners know much about you. So what are you passionate about?
Okay. No, thank you, Tony, firstly for listening to my podcasts. I really appreciate it. Secondly, for asking me this question, because you've been the only guest that's asked me this question. So what am I passionate about? So firstly, I'm passionate about audio and recording, which is why I'm recording this podcast.
Okay.
But I'm also passionate about learning and curiosity. So, for example, I'm passionate about astronomy because I can learn about the universe and understand why we're here, right? I'm also passionate about testing in one way because I've been in testing for a long time and I've had many opportunities to move out of testing.
Okay.
But I've not taken them because...
Why not?
Because in some roles, I've ended up almost doing a back-end developer job.
Yeah.
Ish, right? Some sprints, not every sprint, but some sprints. It was in a T-shaped team where sometimes the testing work dried up. You can always test more, in my opinion, but it dried up in the sense of we automated the critical user journeys we wanted to, and it was a case of actually we got quite a few bugs, and we needed someone to fix some of those bugs.
Yeah.
So the other developers in the team could do the hard grunt of getting new features developed. So I had to pick up a few bugs and do some of that work. And I just thought it's quite repetitive in the sense of you got one feature, you implement that, another feature, you implement that. And what I like about testing is, things change, right? You need to focus on, you can change what you focus on. You can focus on performance testing, non-functional testing, accessibility, usability, functional testing. And there's a lot of different facets to testing. So that means, the role can be quite varied. And that keeps me interested because there's different challenges, different problems to solve. And they all don't tend to be very similar to each other. They're quite diverse. I tend to find, if you're developing features, you tend to be put in the role which you're developing those features. And that tends to be very, within a certain part of the code base because you built up some knowledge in that code base. And it's rare that you're going to work on one part of the system one day and the next day totally in a different team doing something else, because there's a cost to that, to the business, right? With onboarding with different teams and learning different technology stacks. And also people have different expertise, right? Some people like working in certain components. So long story short, testing gives me the opportunity to be curious. And that curiosity fits in with my value system of being curious.
Okay. So you're curious. You like gazing into the stars.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there alien life out there?
So, I think the short answer, the TLDR, is we don't know, right? The US government released a lot of footage of unknown flying content, right?
Yeah.
And I don't want to delve too deep into this because I don't want anyone knocking on my door. But essentially, there's a lot about the universe we don't know. And that's probably where I'm going to leave it because we live in a world with a lot of unknowns, right? And part of testing is to find those unknowns.
You brought it back to testing.
So I just think, do you believe in alien life?
Yes, I think there definitely is alien life out there. Whether we'll ever come in contact with them is probably impossible. But definitely do.
Okay.
And I think that the way things are evolving, artificial intelligence will evolve to precede us and go out and spread out into the universe. And if we do find alien life form, it may be some other civilization's AI or computer that equivalent. Yeah.
Okay. So you're fully on that bandwagon of AI spreading the universe, the Elon Musk mentality of how humanity is going to evolve.
That's mean. Oh, damn it. You caught me. Everything else I disagree with him, but yes.
No, it's an interesting perspective. I don't think there's any right or wrong answer to this. And I think, I've brought up these conversations with a lot of people.
Yeah.
And you hear all sorts of people saying, absolutely not. And I think it comes back to some of the things that happened, 40, 50 years ago.
Yeah.
There was a lot of sightings, right? And the thing is, some of these sightings were attributed to military, aircraft. And of course, not everyone's willing to admit when it's a military aircraft or not, right? So some of these sightings may be genuine. And I think there's a lot of things we don't know about. And I think we need to leave that possibility open. So I'm putting a foot in that door and keeping it open.
Okay. Next question.
Oh, okay.
So what are you watching right now?
It's an interesting question. So I don't consume a lot of content, if I'm very honest.
Okay. Or what are you listening to right now, maybe then?
I don't know. I think I'm listening to myself through the headphones right now.
Okay.
But in reality, I do a lot of reading.
Okay.
Okay. So I don't consume a lot of content purely because I don't make a lot of time to do that. So a lot of my schedule revolves around reading content. So I like to read in bed. Essentially, I read books on the universe, astronomy, that kind of content.
Okay.
And I do keep my finger on the pulse in terms of reading about AI, not necessarily, the statistical models and how we train models and things, but more the use of AI, right? Just to kind of keep my sort of ideas open on that. And a lot of it is just, I don't actually watch a lot of TV or listen to a lot of audio, unfortunately.
Okay.
But maybe I should do some more of that. A lot of it comes down to time.
Yeah.
And if you look at the stars for too long, you end up not having a lot of time to do other things.
Okay.
Sorry, you look a bit disappointed.
No, that's fine. That's fine. That's fine. No, time is limited. Time is limited. So
I mean, time is the biggest currency that we have.
Yeah.
Right. So we need to spend our time quite wisely, I think. And there's nothing wrong with consuming other people's content. I like it when you listen to my podcast. I think that's brings some value to you, hopefully, when you listen to them.
Yeah.
And now that you come on my podcast and Tech and Test, you're going to bring some value to some other folks so they can learn about you.
Hopefully.
Yeah. Okay, Tony, something you mentioned to me or someone else did is, I think you've been hiring quite a lot recently. And I'm just, from taking a step back and just thinking about, the hiring process and, maybe the hiring process is there or maybe it's good or bad. It's not for me to discuss now, but what sort of qualities are you looking for in a good engineer or someone, what sort of things are you looking for?
I guess at first, when you're applying for a place, research the company,
right,
and research the person that's going to interview you.
Yeah,
and that gets you 80% down. It's something that no one seems to do. They'll come into interview with very minimal knowledge of the company, very minimal knowledge of what you're making, and no knowledge of you. So I've had some people I've interviewed knew everything about the company, had listened to a podcast, read my LinkedIn, and then that shows a lot of initiative because a lot of people don't do that.
Yeah.
Another trick that I heard from a colleague was when he was younger, just out of college, he changed his CV so that it used the on the title, it used the font that the company uses and the color that the company uses.
Oh.
And he said just by doing that, he got way more interviews than all of his classmates. So that's an interesting little tip for those coming out of university. Not scientifically backed, but I could see it would work. But really, for a more senior developer, though, it's someone who will be productive, reliable, and I guess confident is really key. And it's a very different skill set to someone who's junior. And you kind of have to feel from the interviewer what area they're looking for, because they may actually be looking for someone that they can mold.
Right.
Or they may be looking for someone that can bring in expertise. So when you're hiring a senior person, you want to hire someone that knows more than everyone on the team. You always want to level up the team every single time. And so when you're being interviewed, you have to prove that you know more than that team, but not in a cocky way, but in a way that it would be nice to work with day to day.
I see. And what how do you know if someone's got more knowledge? Like, because I think some big companies, some big tech companies tend to have these rounds where you have multiple rounds with coding rounds and
what always impresses me if they have a really clicky keyboard and they type really fast and they remember all their syntax and no, it's more just being able to well, I guess the key is don't just jump in and solve the problem,
right?
Because you're probably going to get it wrong. Because what they want you to do is step back and understand the problem and not talk too much about the problem, but kind of work with the interviewer on the solution and then start coding with your clicky keyboard at a super high, fast pace.
Yeah. So really, I think what you've said there, the way I've interpreted it is they're looking if you can problem solve, right? So the coding is a demonstration of how you've problem solved.
Exactly.
Right. So trying to remember things off leak code and trying to reapply them is not the right. Well, I guess there are certain patterns you can apply, but trying to just memorize things and reapply them in the right way to help you solve a specific problem is helpful.
Yeah, when someone knows their stuff, it's really obvious. And whether they get the syntax or even the code that they come up with doesn't have to work, but it has to be intelligent and communicated well. And for someone junior, they just really have to want to try. So I had one junior interviewee who failed horribly, but was really positive. And then he went off and then learned it and finished it and then submitted the solution. And I ended up hiring him because I was really impressed that no one has ever done that before.
So submitted a solution post-interview, you mean?
He went to the recruiter and said, I thought this over, I did my research, and here's the best solution I can come up with it. And I was really impressed.
Ah, brilliant. That shows to me a lot of initiative.
Yeah, and it's rare.
Yeah. And I think that's why it stood out, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
So yeah, standing out.
Yeah, standing out. And maybe standing out where you don't get legal teams involved with copying people's logos and kind of fun. Tony, it's been an absolute pleasure for you to be here in this great studio we've been in today, and to come on to Tech and Test.
I'm honored to be on your podcast after listening to all your episodes and being a fan of the podcast. So, and I wish this podcast all the best, and I'm sure it'll be very successful, and you'll get some sponsors soon, and you'll be on billboards and the works, right?
Okay, thanks, Tony. Thanks for coming on Tech and Test.
Thank you.
Hello, it's Peter. Thank you for listening to this episode of Tech and Test. I personally appreciate it, and I hope you got something out of it too. If you're interested in subscribing, please do, because then you don't miss any episode I've created. And you can also visit techandtest.co.uk, which has all the episodes I've created. And you can visit peterintest.com for my personal blog too. So I'll see you on the next episode.